Hey everybody, welcome to our second episode of Deal or No Deal on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at some more mock trades submitted by people that have watched the video or saw us on Twitter or whatnot. So lots of different mock trades to get through today. Matthew, how you doing?
Doing good. We got the deadline. What, are we a week away now?
We're a week away.
We haven't had any trades yet, really, since the Rantanen one, right?
Yeah, not really.
Hopefully we can get some stuff gets going in the next week here.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. So first deal is to Seattle, Max Domi, Nick Robertson, Fraser Minton, and a 2026 first-round pick. And that's coming from Toronto, of course. And heading back to Toronto would be Jared McCann, Brandon Tanev, and a first-round pick in this year's draft. What do you think of that deal?
That'd be a blockbuster-ish type trade, right? I mean, you're looking at that's quite a few pieces going each way. We all know Jared McCann has kind of been in the rumor mill now that Seattle is maybe willing to trade him. He's still got term on his contract. It would be funny because McCann was picked in the expansion draft from the Maple Leafs when they acquired him from the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? So it's kind of interesting that they didn't protect him and all that. They would kind of be coming full circle, bringing him back if this actually happened. Brandon Tanev is a great piece for the playoffs too. It's that gritty bottom six type forward that every team would want in the postseason. And Seattle's getting some good young players in return. You got Nick Robertson hasn't really established himself in the NHL yet. He's had a okay season. Always been in the rumors too to be traded. Max Domi, again, same type of a thing. I mean, he would be a veteran piece going to Seattle. He's just on a 1-year contract, right? He's not. He got some term on his contract too.
Who, Domi?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 3 more years, 2 or 3 more years.
Right, he signed that. Yeah. He signed that extension rate. And Fraser Minton's a big piece of prospect wise, which Seattle doesn't need prospects. They've got quite a few really good ones. Minton would just be that added prospect in there. I don't know. To me, it's a pretty balanced trade. I mean, you're going first round picks going each way too. Overall, I think this is a really fair deal for both sides, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I would personally say no on behalf of Seattle here. You look at Max Domi; he's having one of his least productive seasons of his career, and it's not looking great for the next. I believe it's 2 seasons at 3.75. Nick Robertson, of course, looking to be moved. There's not a whole bunch of progression going on with him. Fraser Minton's a good pick, but for 2 guys looking that the Leafs could be looking to move on from. For the lack of production, to get McCann and Tanev and swap picks, I don't see how it makes much sense for Seattle to do so. Domi and Robertson could absolutely work out for them. I'm not saying that they're completely dead-end contracts or anything like that, but I don't know. I think McCann and Tanev are worth a lot more than Domi and Robertson, and then that's going to be a pretty significant pick upgrade from the Toronto pick to Seattle's pick.
I mean, that is true. I mean, the first round picks aren't equal. And McCann, he's not having the same season as he's been in the past, but he is still a really established NHL player and a lot better than Domi and at least this season. And, McCann is probably the bigger piece here, and Toronto would win the trade overall. Same for pieces, I think is pretty balanced. But when you're looking at quality of players, it probably goes Toronto getting the better players here. And yeah, I think Seattle would still say no, even though it'd be a really, really tough trade to really say no for each side to go with. But yeah, it probably does go on the Toronto side a bit.
I think if it was a 2nd round pick or even a 3rd round pick going to Toronto, I think it makes a lot more sense. But that 1st round pick this year for Seattle, it's just too valuable. It's going to be 7 to 10 range most likely. So that's a pretty high pick.
True. Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one. This one's from Brandon Marshall on Twitter. To Winnipeg, Scott Laughton. To Philadelphia, Ville Heinola. The pretty simple one. Scott Laughton is a guy that the Jets could certainly be looking at adding, and I think he would fit on that team really well, especially playing alongside Adam Lowry. That third line would suck to play against. And Ville Heinola, he's struggled to kind of get a spot in the lineup regularly. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. There's been a few, like, it seems like the Jets just keep bumping him out of the lineup by signing new guys, but he's got a ton of potential. He's a fantastic defensive prospect. He's just not been able to break through yet. So is this the type of return you think that Philadelphia is going to get for Scott Laughton, or do you think it's not enough?
I think this is what they're getting. I don't think Scott Laughton's as high value as he used to be. I think, they've been trying to move him, I think, for the last couple seasons. And he is still a guy that could maybe benefit from a change in scenery. And the Jets do need a second line center, even though it doesn't seem like they need one with how they're playing. And they did just re-sign Mesnikov not that long ago, and he's really been their second line center. And he's not doing a bad job at it. It's not really that they're really desperate right now with how much they're winning, and it looks like they're going to be running away with the Western Conference at this point. And maybe even the league. I mean, at the end of the season. So, I mean, Laughton would upgrade it a bit and add to that depth. And we talked about it on Prospect Corner past episode about prospects that could get traded. And we talked about Ville Heinola and, saying that he's a guy that, you mentioned the injuries. He's been dealing with so much. And at the beginning of this season, it looked like, this is the chance he can really solidify himself in a spot. And then he gets hurt again. And that's really kind of derailed his development a bit. And I think he could benefit maybe from a reset somewhere else. And I think Philadelphia would probably be a good spot for him. I just has to stay healthy. I think that's the biggest thing. Because he still has a lot of potential. He's still quite young too.
Yeah. There was a report in the last couple of days that Winnipeg had offered a second round pick to Philadelphia for Scott Laughton. And I don't see Heinola having any more value than a second round pick. So I'm assuming that Philadelphia would say no to this, but this is the type of deal I could see going down. Like maybe a bit of a better prospect than Heinola. Like I wonder if Philadelphia would take Chaz Lucius, or if they would take I don't think Winnipeg would offer up like Brad Lambert or anything like that, but one of those guys that are just kind of their higher end guys. Winnipeg has a really good prospect pool, and it kind of goes under the rug or under the radar. People don't give them appreciation for that. So they do have guys more valuable than Heinola. Like, would they look at Salamonson instead? That could make sense. I don't think many Jets fans want to give up Salamonson for Scott Laughton, but that's a deal I could see making more sense.
For sure.
That's a no deal for me. So, all right, moving on to the next one. This one's from Leafs Man. To the Leafs, Mason McTavish, and to the Ducks is a 2026 first round pick, Fraser Minton and Nick Robertson. What do you think about this one?
Everyone's getting rid of Nick Robertson.
Everybody's getting rid of Nick Robertson.
Everyone's getting rid of him. I think Minton is the prospect that they would trade in a deal like this. Easton Cowan, I don't think is on the table at all for trading. I think prospects like Minton, to get something substantial, they'd be putting that in. Mason McTavish, for the Ducks, it's kind of an interesting that they'd be put, I don't know if he's not on the block. This is just a proposal, not mock trade, but there has been talk about guys like, McTavish, Zegras. We've said in the past on Prospect Corner too that we're not sure what the Ducks core is at this point. What prospects are part of it? What young players are part of it? Is McTavish part of this core moving forward? And Leo Carlson's really kind of established himself this season. He's getting better every day. And McTavish is just part of that really bit of a logjam down the middle for the Ducks right now. And, McTavish could be on the move. I think this is a trade that this is what the Ducks would be asking for him. He's got tons of potential still. Lots of upwards production that he could be putting together still too at his age. And I'm not sure this is I'm not sure for Anaheim. I would even say yes to this though, because McTavish, I think, has a lot more upside than Minten does. I think he's a first line type forward, and you're giving up a guy. I think Minten's his ceiling is maybe a good middle six guy. Robertson, I think he's already kind of, I want to say bottomed out already, but I think he's already hit his ceiling. I think he's another middle six. He's not a top line. 2026 pick, going to be a low pick. I would say no if I was Anaheim with this one.
I would as well. I think McTavish is just too valuable. Like you said, he's a top line player, whether you want him at center or on the wing. I think he's better fit on the wing for a first line than the first line center, but either way, it's Mason McTavish is fantastic. He was just picked third overall, 2 drafts ago, maybe 3. So yeah, it's hard to give him up like that. I think he absolutely is part of the core, but you're absolutely right. There's no established core on that team unless you consider like Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish, Radko Gudas, and Jacob Trouba the core. Like, I don't know. Like, they have a ton of young prospects, but none of them have really taken that big stride yet of saying, like, listen here, I'm the guy. Obviously, on defense, they have, like, Olin Zellweger. They have Tristan Leno. They have, I don't know, they have, like, 13 NHL defensemen right now just in their prospect pool. So there's so many that could take that step and say, I'm the number one guy now. This is my team. This is my blue line. And then on forward, just waiting for the day that, like you said, Zegras or McTavish or Carlson just really take that big step. So I don't think it's time to give up on McTavish. I don't think there's a reason to. I think it makes perfect sense for Anaheim to say no to this. If I'm Toronto, if Anaheim calls, Pat Verbeek calls and offers you this, sure, take it. Yeah. I'll even send you a coffee.
Yeah.
All right, next up from Mr. BLK4. This is the one that I've been excited to talk about with you since I saw it commented. So for those that don't know, I cover the Senators. Matthew covers the Canucks. So this one is Pettersson for Stützle. He says, I wanted the Canucks to make this trade before Pettersson signed, and now I think the Canucks may have to add. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Pettersson for Stützle makes sense for Vancouver? And do you think that Vancouver would have to add to that?
It totally makes sense for the Canucks. That's 100%. Right now, as we're sitting, what Pettersson's done since his contract was signed, I do think that they would need to add to this. If this proposal was done after Pettersson had his 100-point season, I would say 1-for-1, done deal. Right now, Stützle is the better player. I mean, he is. I mean, his production is a lot better than Pettersson. He is a star for the Senators. Pettersson's not for the Canucks right now. He is arguably probably I'm being a bit harsh, but a bottom 6 player on the Canucks right now. His production is just bottomed out. He's on his worst career. He's a career worst points per game. He's on pace for his worst season since not even just NHL, but junior. I mean, his point production is just he's just hit rock bottom. So, I mean, right now, I think, yes, the Canucks would have to add something to it to get Stützle. And I don't think the Senators are even in the ballpark of trading Stützle at this point. So I don't know if this is even something to talk about, but it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, this is completely unrealistic. Ottawa is not trading Stützle. I understand, like, from a Canucks perspective, this is the kind of guy you'd want to target and whatnot. But it just makes no sense for Ottawa to even consider trading Stützle. But just to keep this conversation going a little bit, what would it cost, in your opinion, or what would you be comfortable adding to Pettersson? Like, would you go as far as saying Pettersson and Besser for Stützle?
Yeah, I think Besser with an extension for the Senators perspective. I think it's just that Stützle's got so much more value right now, and
he makes $3.5 million less.
That's another one
for longer.
He's got potential to hit 100 points in his career. I don't know if he's on pace for that anymore this season.
No, not this season. He's on pace for. I think he's actually on pace for under a point per game, but there's been a lot of scoring issues in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Sorry, just over a point per game, 83 points.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he does have potential to be a 100-point player in the NHL. He almost got there last season, I believe. So
2 seasons ago, he had 9.
2 seasons ago. Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. So, I mean, I just think he's got more upwards, like I say, potential than Pettersson at this point. I would really like Pettersson to turn things around, and waiting for it now it's been close to a year since his new contract was signed, and he's put up numbers close to maybe a middle six player right now. And it's just very disappointing. And to think that anyone would want Pettersson to give up a guy like Stützle, it's just a zero. I mean, it's less than likely, very, for that to happen. So I'm just not. This is just, like I said, unrealistic at this point. I think, like I said, if this was proposed when Pettersson was at his peak, 100 points, there's going to be more than this coming up, then yeah, I think there's a bit more value, and both sides of maybe if the Senators were willing to do it, I think this is something they would do 1-for-1. But at that point, I don't think the Canucks would even do it because they're like, well, Pettersson, 100-point guy. He's part of our core, which is what the thought was at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, Pettersson has 6 full seasons under his belt for the most part, including this year. And he's only hit 70 points twice. Those two he scored almost 200 points combined in those 2 seasons, but he's only hit 70 points, or he's only hit 70 points twice out of his 6 full seasons in the NHL, and he's not going to do it this year. So that's a bit concerning. Obviously, the offensive upside is there. He's just not hitting it. So there's no reason for Ottawa to even consider this. If you're Patrick Alvin, you're like, absolutely, I'll send you a copy. Yeah, just like the last one. All right. This one is from Seth Hogderp. Sorry if I mispronounced that. This is another Ottawa one. So Anton Forsberg, Jacob Bernard-Docker, and a second-round pick for Jared McCann. And so it might have to be upgraded to a first-round pick if Seattle is going to retain some money on it. I think in this situation, they would not have to retain. Like that, the money in, money out, it works out for Ottawa, I believe, in this situation. So Forsberg, Bernard-Docker, and a second-round pick. Obviously, Seattle already has Philip Grubauer and his $5.8 million or whatever it is in the AHL. That's not ideal. And bringing in Anton Forsberg, who makes $2.75, who's not having a great season, maybe less than ideal. Jacob Bernard-Docker is a good third-pair defensive defenseman, and then a second-round pick, of course. That's probably going to be middle of the second round. So what do you think?
This is similar to one where you're looking at Jared McCann as the better value in this trade. He's just an established goal scorer in the NHL right now, and arguably one of the biggest pieces of the Seattle Kraken. I'm not even sure that. I mean, there is talk that they are wanting to trade him. I just don't know if they should. But that's another discussion. I think they would be wanting more than what this is. Forsberg is a backup goaltender. He would just kind of take over behind the cord. I mean, that's all it would be. Jacob Bernard-Docker, like you said, is a good bottom pair defenseman. And in Seattle, they've got a pretty strong defense. I think he would be in that same role. Does it really make them better? I would say no. And like you say, second round pick is probably a lower, maybe a mid pick. I don't think there's enough value for McCann for what he is. He's not declining. I think he's going to be still a pretty productive player for the next few seasons. So I would say no on Seattle's side for this one.
I think I would too, but I think it's pretty close. Like if Ottawa throws in one of their kind of middle of the road prospects, I think it could make sense. It's just about there. There just needs to be another piece going. Like if it was a 4th or a 5th round pick, I could see it making sense. Or if it was one of their kind of, like I said, middle of the road prospects, like a C level prospect or even a low B level, could definitely make sense. So just about there, but I'm going to say no for Seattle on this exact trade. All right, last one that we have for today. This one's from Justin, who's actually with us at the Hockey Writers. This is a 3-way trade, and it's an interesting one. So the Panthers get Erik Karlsson and Joel Blomqvist. The Edmonton Oilers get Sergei Bobrovsky, which is retained at 50% by Pittsburgh. And the Penguins, in return for Karlsson, Blomqvist, and $5 million in retained salary, get Sam Bennett, Victor Arvidsson, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. This is, I think, extremely unrealistic. But just from the Panthers side, so they're sending out Bobrovsky and bringing in Karlsson and Blomqvist. So they have Spencer Knight, who is playing very well this season. Blomqvist is also playing very well, so they could be a really good tandem. Erik Karlsson is Erik Karlsson. He would be, I think, a really good addition to that Panthers blue line. And obviously, if you're wanting Erik Karlsson, you're going to have to trade Sergei Bobrovsky's contract or somebody along that level. The Penguins 100% say yes to this. But what do you think about the Panthers and Oilers? Do you think that makes sense for either of them?
Their attention is a big part of this. Bobrovsky's contract's ridiculous. It's getting less ridiculous every season as the cap goes up. But he's still, I think, I don't know if I want to say overpaid because he has played quite well. And of course won a cup. He's not as overpaid as he used to be. But, the Oilers do need better goaltending. Stuart Skinner's been very average this season.
He's been far below average, I think.
Below average, maybe. He's not been a legitimate, strong starting goaltender for a team that wants to win a cup. Bobrovsky, of course, already has one. He's very good in the playoffs, so he would be a big upgrade for the Oilers. I think this is a goaltender they should be targeting if he is, in fact, on the block. I don't know about the Panthers getting Karlsson. Karlsson's still overpaid. I want to 50% retain. Maybe it's closer to where he is right now, but he's still he's just not a guy that you want to be paying that much to, even though he is not very far off that 100-point plus season. But he's not been gotten near that when he's been with the Penguins here, and has gone back to his not very good defensively, taking too many risks offensively. I think with the Panthers for their defense, I don't know if they really need a guy like that. Blomqvist he's got a lot of potential as a goaltender, but this is now you've downgraded your goaltending to two guys that I think would just be a good tandem. You wouldn't have a legit, clear-cut starter in that scenario. Penguins, they got a haul for this. That's just crazy what they're getting in this trade. So they win it. They would definitely say yes. I think the Panthers wouldn't be in this. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. Bobrovsky only has one season left after this. Karlsson has 2 seasons left after this. So the money's not forever. It's not like we're talking about Seth Jones's contract or something.
It's true. Yeah.
But the Panthers going into the playoffs this year, they're going to want to go to another Stanley Cup final. It makes no sense to trade Bobrovsky, who he was in the conversation for the Conn Smythe Trophy last year. So it doesn't make sense to trade him as you're headed into the playoffs. Now, if Bobrovsky was really struggling with like a 895 and they were kind of a wild card team, I could see this making perfect sense for the Panthers. Really get a big shakeup going. They would love to add a player like Erik Karlsson to the back end. I don't think they want his contract, but Erik Karlsson would change the complete dynamic of that team for the better, I think. And obviously, Pittsburgh, absolutely. Kyle Dubas would be jumping out of his chair for that. But I think, you look at the Oilers too. You're paying Victor Arvidsson a first and a second for Bobrovsky at $5 million. 100%. I think you do that.
Yeah.
So the Panthers, I agree, are the only team saying no here.
Which kind of makes the whole thing fall apart, but
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that'll wrap things up for the second episode of the Deal or No Deal for the 2025 trade deadline. we're looking for plenty of more mock trades. If we have enough, we'll definitely get another episode in before the trade deadline, which is a week from today as we're recording. So make sure to leave those in the comments of the YouTube video and let us know on Twitter as well. All that stuff. Make sure to check out thehockeywriters.com for all the trade deadline content, breaking news stories, analysis, and everything else you could ever ask for. So thanks for checking out this video, and we'll see you next time.